here's your host, Brian Beatty.
Good morning, Charleston, and welcome to another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. I am live in the studio today. Haven't done this in a little bit, so I want to take your calls. I want you guys to, share your concerns with me about the real estate market. There's a lot to, I think, discuss. There's a lot to be, quite frankly, not worried about, but inquisitive about. It's a very interesting market. If you're a listener of this show, then last show I really put together what I thought was a compelling argument for where we are as a market right now and why I think this summer is just going to be a slow real estate market. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to unpack that a little bit more. I want to talk about, of course, overall market dynamics, but I want to talk about agent behavior and buyer and seller behavior right now. When we sell real estate at the level that we do, we've got a really good pulse on the market. And I share that experience with you as somebody that's done, look, I've done 1,500 transactions here in Charleston, about $1 billion worth of real estate represented. So I share those experiences with you, and I share the overall feel of the market, which usually leads to me being able to tell you what's going to happen before, major media channels bring it up, or other agents in general that just kind of rely on the data being fed to them rather than sifting through it and drawing their own conclusions themselves. We try to give you a bit of a heads up, right? That's what this show is about, is informing you on the market and also talking about the process of buying and selling real estate, so you're just an informed consumer. So if you guys have questions today, if you want to know what's going on with this market, you've got general knowledge questions. There's really no question too silly, too rudimentary. I want you guys to feel comfortable calling into the show and just asking anything you want to ask real estate related. The number here in the studio is 843-556-1250. That's 843-556-1250. Now, if you want to reach out to me personally, you're thinking of selling a home, buying a home, investing in real estate, maybe you have some real estate properties that you own that you want us to rent out for you or manage for you, then give us a call. 843-800-0065, 843-800-0065, or our website, listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. So let's just do a very brief recap of what I discussed last week, which was just the overall market dynamics, right, as we're seeing them right now. And, the kind of categories that I focused on were prices and closings, pending sales, and then, of course, everybody wants to know which direction we're moving in. Are we becoming more of a buyer's market? Are we still a seller's market? Kind of where do we stand? And so let me just rifle off some of these stats really quickly so you guys can get a bit of a refresher, right? So new listings, properties that are going on the market, that's up 19% from this time last year. Pending sales are up about 3.5%. Same thing with closings. We're selling properties in 1 day faster than we were last year. We went from 39 to 38. The median sales price is up 4% to $418,689 in the Charleston Tri-County area. We're getting 96.8% of our asking price. Affordability is, I think that actually might be the lowest I've ever seen it locally at 70. The home affordability index is at 70. And so essentially what that means for those that don't listen to this program or haven't heard me say this before is that with the price homes are at right now in relation to wages and then the cost of borrowing money, right, the interest rates, that means that our median income in our area is only 70% of what is necessary to qualify for the median priced home in our area at today's interest rates and with a 20% down payment. So really, home affordability is actually worse than 70% because there aren't a ton of people that are putting down 20%. They still have, several options out there for 10%, 5%, 3%. There are down payment assistance programs now that, lenders, we get calls from lenders all the time that want to talk with us about new products and take us out for coffee or lunch. And, talk about all these products that they have, right? So we get inundated with that kind of stuff. I get a call, 2-3 times a week to be invited out to lunch or coffee. If I really wanted to, I guess, and times got really tough, I could eat for free. I could probably get breakfast and lunch covered most days. But, home affordability index is at 70 right now. It's gotten worse. Part of the reason for that is that prices continue to go up, right? Interest rates have remained unchanged. The Fed isn't helping us out there. In fact, they're doing what I think they set out to do. From my perspective, I think that they kind of see the end in sight, right? There's some light at the end of the tunnel, meaning, hey, we've raised rates to the point where people are really starting to feel it now. And so I think we've got probably 6 months or so, 2 or 3 quarters of just a boring real estate market. If I can't find another way to describe it, it's just going to be slow. There's lack of demand on both sides of the table. And that's, I think, what they set out to accomplish. I mean, obviously, we've got a bunch of folks right now that own real estate that have a fantastic interest rate, and they don't have to move. And they've watched over time as their equity has just gone through the roof, and they are not incentivized to go and sell their home and buy another unless they need to, or they have the ability to afford it financially, and they just want to. But that's an interesting place for a seller to be in, because you've got this overwhelming, I think, lack of motivation among the people that don't have to move, right? It's not like anything is pushing them out of the house. They haven't recently gotten a new job and have to move to, Boise, or, maybe they're moving here, but it's because they can live anywhere. They can work anywhere. And I think that with what's happened over this market, or with the market over the past several years, is that although we are starting to see some equilibrium, we're in a bit of a gridlocked situation in our market. Sellers don't really want to give up the power that they've gotten used to over the course of the past 10 years, which is about how long we've kind of been in a seller's market. Buyers are tired of getting beaten up over the process of buying a house. I mean, over the past several years, it's been really hard for buyers to stomach doing something like paying more than what somebody's asking for their property. I mean, no one likes to overpay for anything, and every buyer and every seller wants a deal in some way, shape, or form. So it's gotten really tough, I think, over the years for them to play in this environment where prices have continued to go up, interest rates have just gotten high and stayed high, and they're kind of wondering, well, what's going to break? I mean, when does this break for buyers come? I think it's actually happening right now, is the point. I think that we are watching this market shift and cool down right in front of our eyes. The data does not necessarily prove that yet, because if you think about just data in general in real estate, there's always a lag, right? Real estate is a lagging indicator of the economy. But even with real estate data in and of itself, you've got to think about the fact that, when somebody puts their home on the market, as an example, or let's change the scenario. Let's say that you're a buyer and you want to make an offer on a house, and that house has been on the market for 6 weeks. And that seller that's selling the property, they've already reduced their price once, and you want to come in below that asking price, and you want to negotiate, right? So typical scenario. Well, if you think about it from the seller's perspective for just a moment, when they're reviewing your offer, they're talking with their listing agent, and that listing agent at the point in time that they put that property on the market was like, hey, here's all your comps. Here's what everything else is selling for. Here's what's under contract. Here's your competition. Here's what's on the market, or at least you hope that they're having these conversations. I know a lot of agents that don't. They just go in with a predetermined price and try and get the seller to get as close to that as possible. But no matter what, they're going to walk out the door with a listing agreement because they need listings and they're going to list it for whatever the seller wants. Anyways, when the seller's selling that house or putting that house on the market initially, they're looking at stuff that has sold over the course of the past 6 months. And you have to think that that property that sold 6 months ago was obviously a reflection of that price at that time, but not really, because it went under contract 2 months before that based on data that was received 6 months before that. So it always takes a little while for the data actually to catch up with the overall trend within the market. And I think right now we're dealing with something that we've not really seen before. We're dealing with we're coming off of a very low interest rate environment. You know, by the way, the last time that interest rates were in the 5% range for a decade was the 1950s. So we're coming off of a very historically low environment for rates. Obviously, prices shot through the roof. They increased at a faster pace than we've had in history. But prices continue to go up. And so buyers are now at the point where they just don't want to play the game anymore. They are fatigued. And there are a ton of them that don't have to move either. And so what's happening is we're starting to see more and more sellers that are kind of getting it. They're putting their homes on the market now because they want to cash in on that equity. Because I think what's going to happen is we're going to stall out for the course of the next 2-3 quarters. And then interest rates are going to come down, and then prices are going to go through the roof again. And so a lot of people are saying, well, why would I sell now when that might happen? Well, I think you're going to have a ton of competition. And I think that overall, I think we can agree that this market has to balance, right? At some point in time, the pendulum is going to swing the other way. The question is, how much more room do we have to grow from a home value perspective? Because we have to keep in mind wages. We have to ask the question, where is the money going to come from to afford all of this expensive real estate in the Charleston area? Or is the demand that has pushed pricing up somewhat artificial in nature? If you want to have a conversation with me privately, I'm going to give you my phone number, which you can call or text, and that number comes straight to me. It's 843-800-0065, 843-800-0065, or check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. I'll also just say really quickly that, and I've been promoting this on the show, but I've gotten incredible feedback from it, and thank you so much to those of you that have taken the time to write something nice after reading this guide that I put together. But I put a lot of time into this, and it's unlike anything that I know of in this area. It is the most comprehensive home seller guide in Charleston. It's about 50 pages. And if it's something you guys, and you can obviously pick and choose the chapters or areas of interest that you have with regard to the home selling process. But if you want to get your hands on a copy of that guide, 843-800-0065 is the number you're going to text. And you're just going to text the word guide. So text the word guide to 843-800-0065. Now, I want to talk about something that I don't focus a lot on this program, because so much of what I talk about on this show is consumer centric, right? I want to help buyers and sellers really understand the process and the market so that if they're about to get into it, they have realistic expectations. They know what to expect. You know, I think a really good salesperson is somebody that's not just a good problem solver, but a good problem identifier. And I think the more you listen to the show and the more you understand the mechanics of this real estate market, the better prepared you are to at least ask the right questions, if nothing else. So thank you to those of you that listen to the show, by the way. But what I want to talk about right now that's just a little bit different than usual is just I want to talk to agents for a moment. You know, for several years, I was an international real estate coach while I was also running my real estate team, while I was running a property management company and a private money lending company, and being an agent and being an investor, and then, of course, trying to be a dad and a husband and all that great stuff, and just keep all these balls in the air and juggling and without dropping anything. But I had an interesting run for several years where I was an international real estate coach. And so I would coach other real estate team leaders like me that were selling between 75 and 150 homes per year that wanted to sell more or wanted to get more time back in their life and achieve some version of work-life balance. And what I found in coaching all of those different company owners, which spanned everywhere from New York to Canada to California. I mean, I had folks literally all over the country and in Canada that I was coaching, because the dynamics of real estate are pretty much the same. Of course, Canada's market's a little different, but the fundamentals are the same. And the way in which you run your business like a business is the same. And what I found is that most agents really don't have business acumen. What they were really good at is selling real estate. They figured out a way to sell a lot of real estate, and then they reached a point of diminishing return. They just couldn't do any more with the time they had or with the energy that they had, right? They were tapped out. They had reached their limit. And so they start adding people to the equation to buy themselves more time, to delegate certain things so that they can go and continue to sell more real estate, right? It's how every great business starts and scales or grows. But along the way, they miss a lot of important things that are important fundamentals when running a business, especially a business that's positioned or that you're trying to position for growth. And we can talk a lot about the ways in which real estate agents run their business. That probably wouldn't be all that exciting to hear. But what I will tell you is that agents, for the most part, are tired. They're worn out. They're burned out. It's a scary thing to say. It's like, I was a baseball player growing up. I played baseball at a high level. Went to the Little League World Series, gold medal in AAU, pitched at the College of Charleston. Had an awesome baseball career, and there's like one word that you don't say in baseball, and it's slump. You never admit that you're in a slump. It's like getting a case of the yips. And so a lot of agents are fearful of even admitting that they are burned out right now, but they are. And it's because they're not focused on the right things. They are, I think they complain a lot about the fact that maybe they're calling all of these people and nobody answers the phone, which is true, by the way. I mean, it's so hard to get people on the phone anymore. I'm a phone guy. I mean, if you want me to text or email you, sure, I can, but I would so much rather just have a conversation with you. It'll be faster, and I think we can get a lot more accomplished. But anyways, a lot of agents are irritated at the fact that they can't get anybody on the phone. Thank you, by the way, for all of these companies that just religiously spam us. I get at least a dozen spam calls a day. There are days where it's 20, 30, 40 spam calls a day between my personal line and then my company. It's absurd. And so it makes people not want to answer the phone, and I get that. But when they get folks on the phone, they're really upset and they're frustrated. This, again, as agents, the agent mindset is just they're irritated at the fact that not a lot of people want to talk to them, and when they do talk to them and when they set a meeting, a lot of those meetings end up getting canceled. And they, in sales-based training really hasn't changed all that much over the past several decades. It's all about, ABCs always be closing, right? I have a very different way of approaching this process. I don't care so much about turning every conversation into an appointment, into an agreement. I care about adding value to people based on where they are at that stage in the process. And what's interesting is that by not focusing on something like conversion ratios, our conversion ratios are significantly higher than industry averages. I know. I mean, I was on stage last year in front of hundreds of people talking about how somehow every 5 conversations we have with someone leads to an appointment. The industry standard is 5 times that. And so, we've developed this way of adding value to people at whatever stop along the way they're at on their way to buying a home or selling a home, and just offering them value where they are. I think agents, for those of you that are listening, you're going to have more conversations with people to find the ones that are truly motivated, because I think a lot of people like talking about real estate, but not a lot of people are motivated enough right now to actually do something about it. Look at all the sellers that are on the market right now that are starting to languish. I mean, we have listings right now that have not sold, and it makes no sense. We have listings right now that are not getting the kind of activity they're supposed to be getting, and it makes no sense other than buyers are just over it. They're tired. Agents are a little bit tired. We've got just this depression that's starting to set in our market, and it's showing in the kind of like the pre-data that we get to help a seller understand whether they're like positioned correctly or not. And that's online traffic, inquiries, and showings. We have to have those things in order to get offers. And that's what's starting to lag right now. So for those that aren't really in tune with what's going on in the market, and they don't religiously watch that kind of data like I do, then they're just kind of shocked, and the default for a lot of agents is just to complain about it and say, oh, it's just it's a tough market, and they're not changing anything. And that's, I think, the big difference. And that's why a lot of these agents are going to leave the industry. It's just too hard to stay motivated and stay happy and positive when you show up at work and you try and call 50 people and one or two of them answers and they don't want to sell or buy, and then you just go home empty-handed. So you end up, like reorganizing your desk so you can feel good about yourself when in reality you didn't accomplish a thing. That's how a lot of agents are right now. And so I think for those of you that are listening that are not agents but that are actual buyers or sellers, I think you need to have your guard up a little bit. I think you really need to focus in on asking these agents the right questions when you interview them, right? Keyword interview. Don't just go with the agent that has a nice smile and has an upbeat, charismatic attitude and can speak somewhat intelligently about the market or the process. You have to ask them some real questions. You have to really understand what this agent is going to do for you. And I've got all of these questions all lined up, ready to go as part of the guide that I wrote. So if you guys want to get your hands on that and understand, from my perspective, right, as an agent, a top agent for a long time, 15 years ranked in the top 1%. If you want those questions or just access to this information on this process in general, then get your hands on our guide, the most comprehensive home seller guide in Charleston. And to do that, you're going to text the word guide, that's guide, to 843-800-0065. Text the word guide to 843-800-0065. And just really quickly, if you guys want to reach out to me personally, you've got questions about this process, you're thinking of buying, selling, investing, having your properties managed, or even getting into real estate as a career choice, my number, 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065, or listingsincharleston.com. So we've talked about just kind of overall market dynamics, the fact that we've continued to appreciate as a market. And of course, we can understand where that demand came from, right? We had all this great reshuffling of folks in terms of where they could live and work because they could work from anywhere. A lot of people chose Charleston for obvious reasons, right? How awesome is Charleston? But now that it seems like a lot of that reshuffling is over, yes, we still have people that are moving to, the Charleston area. Somerville is the number 3 zip code in the country to move to, by the way. But it's also begging the question of, where's a lot of this demand coming from? A lot of these institutional investors that purchased property in these different areas had a part to play in creating some of this artificial demand that elevated values in those neighborhoods. And now a lot of people are just kind of stuck. They don't want to buy or they can't afford to buy because prices have gotten too high. Interest rates haven't come down to the point that allows them to afford the monthly payment. Or as this, buyer that we're currently working with said very pointedly, he said, I used to be able to afford $1 million house. My income hasn't changed, but now that same house might as well be a $700,000 house, which means a smaller home, less features, maybe not as good of a condition, maybe not as good of an area. It's too much to sacrifice for me right now to make sense out of buying. And so we start talking about this because it's an interesting comment. And I think it's how a lot of buyers feel right now. But there's an opportunity in this market because I think what's going to happen here is we're going to have a little bit of a depression over the course of the next 6 months. A lot of agents are going to be very irritated. Go get good at golf or something because there's not going to be a lot to do in the real estate market unless you're willing to work. And by the way, that's a rare trait to find in a real estate agent is someone with a capacity for a lot of work, for real work ethic. Let me tell you, I've hired and trained about 100 people in the real estate industry, maybe a little bit more at this point. And I'll tell you that the number one thing that people lack is work ethic. And it's a shame, but it's the truth. And so I think that for the course of the next several months, we're going to see a little bit of a depression here. I think things are going to flatline if they haven't already. We're starting to see that on some of the listings that we have. But then when interest rates inevitably come down next year, I think it's going to happen. They've said it's more than likely going to happen. It's probably not going to happen this year, although that'd be a nice surprise. But when those interest rates come down, I think that we're going to see these prices go back up a little bit as people get back into the market because there are too many people sidelined. So we're going to have this injection of interest on both sides of the equation, on the seller side and on the buyer side, because sellers are buyers, buyers are sellers. It's what keeps the wheel turning. But I think that there's an opportunity over the course of the next few months for folks to take advantage of this little depression that we're about to go through by negotiating with the seller for an interest rate buy down. You have the ability, if you're getting a mortgage, by the way, and if you're cash, then even better. There's a bunch of different things we can do to negotiate a great deal for you if you're paying cash. But if you're getting a mortgage and you're just not happy with the home that you're going to get for the payment that you're responsible for making every month, right? The value associated with what you're buying, then I think it is really important to just understand what an interest rate buy down is. It's very simple. It's just that, it has to be positioned correctly, I think. And you have to use it on the right seller at the right time. Of course, you can ask anybody for anything, and as long as they agree to it, then, you're golden. That's one of the great things about real estate, by the way, is you can put darn near whatever you want in a contract so long as the buyer and the seller can agree to it and it's legal. And not too weird. I've seen some weird things happen in real estate, but I won't go down that path. But I think if you're a buyer right now, your opportunity is taking advantage of this lag, this overall just feeling of blah in the market, and using that as an opportunity to get some favorable terms so that you get the house that you want now at a lower price and at a lower interest rate before prices go back up. And then when interest rates come down, you just refinance. This whole marry the house, date the rate thing, it's kind of cheesy. I don't like saying it because it just makes me, I don't like coined phrases like that. I like to be more, genuine, I suppose, authentic. But there's some truth to it, right? I mean, if we have the ability to help you purchase a property and for the first year, your interest rate is 2 percentage points lower than the current rate. So let's say that, the rates right now are 6.99%, but for the first year, you're paying a 4.99%. And then the second year, it's a 5.99%. And then the third year, it's 6.99%. And of course, at any point in time throughout that process, if those interest rates come down, you just refinance. And a lot of these lenders will do that at no cost. So this is a matter of positioning. This is a matter of either following the pack or being the leader of the pack. I've always looked at the other direction when people are overwhelmingly headed in one direction. I've done that with my marketing. I've done that with my decision-making in business to an extent. It's served me well. So I think that for those of you that are in the market that could move, that maybe would like to move, but are just not sure how to piece this all together, you're going to have some opportunity to negotiate fairly heavily with sellers that are frustrated. They're confused. Their agents are frustrated and confused and tired. you can use it as an opportunity, I think, to get a good deal on a house and structure it in such a way that you can move from point A to point B and have that be a fairly seamless transaction. Because also remember, a lot of folks that want to buy a house right now have to sell their home first. Well, in a really competitive market, it's really, really hard to get that seller to agree to a home sale contingency-based contract, meaning, hey, I want to buy your house, but I have to sell mine first, and I have to put it on the market and, wait for showings and negotiate an offer and hope that it closes before I can buy yours. Most sellers don't want to take on that risk or that pain out of fear of the unknown, fear that, if they do take your offer and something else comes along with, a buyer doesn't have to sell their house first, then, they're stuck in an agreement with you. And so they choose not to do it in the first place. Now, in my guide, I talk about a bunch of different ways of structuring this. And if you go on YouTube, because all of my radio shows are videoed, and we put them on YouTube. We put them on Spotify and Google Play and iTunes and all that stuff as a podcast as well. But on YouTube, there's a video that I talk almost the entire show about different ways of selling a home and buying a home without owning two homes by accident and without becoming homeless. And it's not just a home sale contingency. I was just having a conversation with a seller last week, and he said, I didn't get a great chance, honestly, to have a long conversation with him before I went to his house to walk through it and talk about the process. He was in a rush. I was in kind of a rush. He says, but hey, Brian, I know you. I want to talk with you about selling my home. We're serious about it. Can you meet me here tomorrow at blah, blah, blah? Met with him, talked with him. As we're sitting down, he says, what I'd really like to do is I'd like to do a home purchase contingency so that we can get the ball rolling on my end here. Probably do a brokerage exclusive first, have a home purchase contingency attached to it so that we can go and find a home to purchase and just be in a better position when we want to make that offer on that house we find. And I know that for those of you that are listening that don't really understand all of that, it's a bit of a mouthful and probably went a little over your head, but I am sitting at this kitchen table like grinning from ear to ear. I'm like, you guys are awesome. How do you even know how to do this? And he's like, we just listen to your show. I was like, what a day. I love it when people take the opportunity to educate themselves and become a true informed consumer. So thank you to those of you that listen to this show. For those of you that have not really taken the opportunity to immerse yourself in some of the data that I have given away over the course of the past 11 years on this show, check it out online. listingsincharleston.com. Check us out on YouTube. We got about 1,000 videos on there. And again, if you want to reach out to me, if you guys have some questions, you want to have a conversation about the market, really doesn't matter to me what stage of the process you're in, whether you're just kind of in the dreaming phase where you want to make a move at some point, you just don't know when or where. Or maybe you're in what I call like the research phase, right? Where you're really starting to put together some information that you need in order to make some informed decisions. That would be things like, how much is my home worth? How much equity do I have? Where would I go if I did decide to move? What does that look like? And what can I prepare for right now as a way of saving money down the road? And that is really at the core why I wrote the guide that I wrote, because there are so many different ways for you as a homeowner to save money throughout the process that does not have to just come from negotiating the commission or negotiating the sales price. I mean, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of ways that you can save money in this process. And so if you want to get your hands on that guide and you want to learn how to save money on selling your home, or putting it another way, how to make more money when selling your home, then text the word guide to 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. All right, so with the last few minutes, what I want to talk about is, we've been talking about the fact that the market is, I think, going to be slow. A little slower than anticipated, I think, because I think we're just running out of steam. I think folks are just tired. They're tired of paying the really high price. They're tired of seeing interest rates remain high. And I think that the Fed is doing what they need to do to make it hurt just enough to destroy demand and bring a little bit of balance back to the market. I'm not I'm not an advocate necessarily of what they're doing, and I'm certainly not an advocate of Bidenomics. But and who knows what in the world would happen if we've got 4 more years of Bidenomics? That's a scary thought. But I think that a lot of people right now are just going to sit around and watch and wait and straddle the fence and frankly miss some opportunities in the process. I think, again, if you're a buyer, you have an interesting opportunity, a little window, kind of the eye of the storm, if you will, to take advantage and to use what's happening right now to your advantage to get a better deal. I just think a lot of folks would prefer not to put themselves in that situation and just kind of follow more of the status quo, right? If everybody else is doing it, then I'll feel comfortable doing it. I've just always at least looked at what going against the grain would look like. And there have been plenty of times where I've made decisions in my business and in my life that went against the grain and worked out really well for me. So it just depends on whether you want to be the trendsetter or the trend follower. And either is fine. But I do anticipate that once these interest rates come back down, prices are going to go back up, at least for the short term. It's going to be a very competitive environment again, whereas now you've got a little bit of time on your side, or time on your side in the form of a lack of demand to buy homes at the moment. So that being said, I think that people are also very budget conscious right now. I think part of that is because if you really think about it, I mentioned a little earlier in the show that the last time we saw interest rates in 5% range for about a decade or so was the 1950s. But if you have to think about the 1950s compared to now, in the 1950s, maybe you had a nice coat or two and a few pairs of shoes and a few pairs of slacks and a few pairs of shirts. And, you open up the fridge and you've got a somewhat decent amount of food in there. Whereas now we are a population that is obsessed with consumption. We just spend and spend and spend and consume and consume and consume. And we all have expectations of, granite countertops and hardwood flooring and, have this overall appetite for design. And, we want to keep up with the Joneses to an extent. So I think that this overconsumption that we have as a population is making real estate that much harder, and will make it that much harder in the short term because you're not going to be able to afford what you want to afford if your income hasn't gone up in relation to the cost of ownership. It really just means that every day, every week, every month that goes by, what you can afford just looks a little bit less attractive, is a little bit smaller, is in a little bit less attractive of an area, has a little bit of a smaller yard, all of those things. And that's why I think we are where we are. Now, of course, you have plenty of people that are moving here outside of Charleston with money, and to them, they're not all that fazed by it. But for the folks that live here locally, I think what we're seeing a lot of, quite honestly, is a lot of folks that say, you know what, it's been great. We can't believe we're going to do this, but we're actually leaving Charleston. We're going to pack up, we're going to cash out, and we're going to maybe go to a more rural area like Ravenel or Hollywood, or we're going to go to the upstate like Greenville, or we're just going to go somewhere different. We're going to be with family or whatever in a different part of in the country. But we are starting to see a lot of locals think about putting their home on the market, and that's evidenced by data, by the way. If you look at properties that are what we call pre-owned homes, right, anything other than new construction, our inventory for pre-owned homes is up a little over 70% compared to this time last year. More homes are being put on the market that are currently owned by folks. And I think that's because they're seeing the opportunity. They're saying that, hey, you know what? Maybe it's time to cash out and use this window of opportunity to try and maybe beat up the seller a little bit on the house that we go and buy, rather than having to sell in an environment and then be a buyer in the environment that we've grown used to over the past several years. So anyways, I think that people are very budget conscious right now. And as a result of that, we are kind of turning the dial up a little bit on the incentives that we're offering folks. And I'll be perfectly blunt and honest in saying that, we'd love to work with more people than we're currently working with because the market's just slow. So you get the benefit of that. We, of course, are still doing the buy and sell with me and move for free incentive. But, we've got a bunch of different packages that you can choose from when selling your house. All of them come with different levels of, services that we provide for different amounts of commission. And so right now, our top world-class white glove, red carpet commission plan, we are doing for 25% off, which is it's a lot of money. Basically, even though no commission is quote unquote standard, we are reducing our top level commission plan to a more standardized level. So if you'd like more information on that, if you want to get a copy of our guide, 843-800-0065. Remember to text the word guide to 843-800-0065. Listingsincharleston.com is the website. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great weekend.